Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with some more Warhammer 3 gameplay. You see, now that we can show off custom battles, I want to take the time and look at the units from the Cathay roster. The roster itself is quite large and has a lot of different varied troops that you can use in a lot of different battle situations, so in this video we're going to look at each individual troop, check out all their stats and so on, as I know some people are curious, and I'll give you some overall thoughts on the units themselves, how they can be used on the battlefield and so on, so let's not waste any more time and jump right in. We'll start off with the Peasant Long Spearmen, as you'll have them as soon as you start your campaign. They can be recruited from your provincial capitals and so on, and they are, well, they're not terrible in all honesty. Yes, they're not the best unit considering that obviously it's the first unit you can recruit, but they're expendable, they're anti-large, they've got charge defense versus all, and they can form quite a decent target. Anti-large will be very useful, not only because you're going to be dealing with a lot of ogres, but there are lots of large entities through the demons rosters, such as bloodthirsters and so on. Yep, these aren't going to do that much damage, but it can hold them down for a little bit and try to do as much as possible. Plus, if you need cheap units for like a secondary army and so on, you're going to need a few of these alongside another unit. Jade Warriors are a tier 1 unit, so you're not going to have peasants for long. They're quite strong for what they are, especially since they have decent armor, they're also shielded, and again, I can't stress this enough, these are a tier 1 unit, so you're going to be able to use them quite often. The fact is that I've got some campaigns running for a decent amount of turns now, and I'm still recruiting them, because they're good value for money, they're able to do decent damage, and I feel like the unit is worth it even for late campaign. Obviously money is a factor here too, as they are cheaper than some of the other ones, but we'll get to them soon. Following up with the Jade Warriors, there's also a variant with halberds, and obviously, considering that you're going to be dealing with a lot of ogres, especially if you're playing a Zhao Ming, you're going to want as many halberdiers as possible. Again, another unit that I've been able to use in late campaigns too. Early on, I did try to focus to get the building up to its second tier just to be able to recruit them, as at one point I started rampaging through the Mountains of Morn, and I realized that I was going to need some more anti-large. They worked out quite well, and it was not too long to get them. Though eventually you'll start to replace them with a Celestial Dragon Guard. Very powerful melee units with armor-piercing, anti-large, and charge defense against all. I actually have a quite large force of these with some range units and Zhao Ming rampaging across the Chaos Waste at the moment, as I wanted to get rid of Skarbrand, Nikari, and Kurgath quite early, and they've been doing quite a lot of damage. In fact, they didn't really have too much trouble. I had 2 units of them taking down a Bloodthirster. Obviously, I did buff them up a little bit with some spellcasting and so on, but they're still able to hold out their own, and I do believe that they are just one of the best looking units that I've seen so far. You can recruit your first range units as soon as your campaign begins. These are the Peasant Archers, another expendable unit, and yeah, kinda weak in terms of stats, but with 160 range, which isn't too bad at all, you can start peppering your enemies from quite a decent distance. It's another unit which I find many people will still be using into later campaigns, especially if you need a cheap army just to defend an area. They are really cheap in terms of upkeep, you've seen them through playthroughs and so on, and you're able to boost them up and make them do quite a decent amount of damage. Despite the range and magic meta not being so relevant anymore, these are still relatively useful, and I imagine that you'll be using them a lot. Iron Hail Gunners are an interesting unit. Mid to short range is the best way to explain them, as they only have 90, but they are able to fire armor-piercing missiles. They're able to do quite a decent amount of damage, and obviously if you're dealing with, say for example, very heavily armored Chaos Warriors, you're going to want these on your walls or at the front of your units to hail some fire. You can also recruit them very early into your campaign, which means that I've been having them at the front with some peasant archers in the back providing supporting fire, and it's worked out decently to say the least. A few extra melee troops to give them some harmony bonuses, and you're pretty much sorted. Next we're going to have 2 different units on screen, as they are only differentiated by a shield. These are the Jade Warrior Crossbowmen, one with shield, one without. Both of them very useful, 160 range once again, able to pack quite a bit of a punch, and fairly decent in melee combat. Both of them are quite good, though I preferred the shielded variant, as when I run out of ammo I can send them in to do damage and they'll be shielded to protect themselves, extra melee defense, and obviously just being a bit more protected. Eventually these will become much more common throughout your army, which does help. It's a bit of a weird thing obviously, because you can focus very heavily on range with Cathay and still have decent melee, but you've got the whole yin and yang aspect, so you're still going to have to mix up your armies if you want all the benefits. Crane Gunners are a very interesting unit, and you should all be kinda used to them if you've played as the Skaven in Warhammer 2 due to the Warpstone Jezzails. Very, very high range, 275 to be in fact. armored, but you don't want them anywhere near melee combat, and obviously armor-piercing missiles. These are your snipers. They're able to do a decent amount of damage. You can use them to pick out characters and so on, but don't expect them to be able to fire quite heavily into hordes. From a gameplay point of view and how I've been using them, I usually do have 2 for support. Normally you want them quite far away, however, with the subject of the harmony bonus for reload skill and so on, you want them close to your army at that point too. And lastly, there are the Celestial Dragon crossbowmen, armored and shielded with armor-piercing missiles. 160 range once again, but more than capable to be thrown into melee combat and do some damage. It's one of those units that you want all over the place, especially if you can then have the Celestial Guard with you too. They synergize extremely well for a late tier stack, as you'll obviously get the harmony bonus, but you can throw them into melee should you have to stop shooting for any reason, or if you run out of ammo. They are fairly expensive, which is obviously expected, but by the time that you start recruiting them, it's likely that you've already got some modifiers to reduce some upkeep towards these units. Peasant Horsemen are the first cavalry unit that you can recruit, and believe it or not, I would call them really useless, but since they're expendable and they've got Vanguard and they're very fast, you're able to use them and probably get some good uses from them early campaign at least. Vanguard is of course quite useful, especially if you want to flank around the enemy and so on. They're not going to mow down enemies, I'm going to tell you that outright. They're not going to do that much. But if you see straggling artillery and so on, you can just go take it out really quickly, or cycle charging if you're any good at that. They have their uses. I must admit I don't use them that much, but I did find them quite useful early on at least. Jade Lancers are the next tier, and these are much more capable. Yes, they're not as quick, but they're armored and shielded, armored to the teeth to be honest. They've got decent anti-infantry attacks, and you can use them for pretty much anything. They do work as quite good shock cavalry too. Cavalry is kind of weird when it comes to Grand Cathay, as obviously the whole yin and yang aspect makes you want to bring your troops together, and obviously cavalry needs to be a part because, you know, they're a shock unit, they'll have to go quite far, stay hidden, and then charge into the enemy. I haven't seen too many uses for these, it's just one of those things. I could be wrong, and some of you guys might feel that there is something of value here, but I haven't really seen out of all the roster any big uses for this. Great Longmar Riders, on the other hand, are fairly useful. Yeah, they've got fear, which is kinda pointless against ogres and so on, but they're extremely fast, they're anti-infantry, they're well armored, you can use them to flank around the enemy, you can have them on both foot or flying. I've honestly found a lot of different uses for these, especially, say for example, trying to pick out the enemies from behind, but knowing full well that I won't be able to move cavalry around. This is more of the case of fighting the Ogre Kingdoms, for example, when they bring a lot of Saber-Tusk packs or Mournfang, or when dealing with other Cathayan factions. I'd say that they are pretty decent support if you're using one of the dragon characters, as they can fly quite quickly and help them out if anything is needed. But this takes me now to the Terracotta Sentinel, and I must admit I don't see too much value in this. They're very heavily armored, they're armor piercing, they can do a lot of melee damage, but they're so terribly slow that if you're dealing with anything range focused, like say for example another Cathayan faction, even ogres or Tzeentch, this can get killed off quite easily unless you're healing it up. I see its value because I have used some and I've been stuck in choke points and so on, but I haven't really been in that many choke point battles, so I don't really see it too useful. Though, mind you, if you're dealing with a big siege and you're defending, of course, then it'll probably be able to be a bit more useful if you can get it in a choke point over there. It's just, like I said, they're just terribly slow. The Sky Lantern itself is a pretty interesting unit. Obviously it's a flying war machine, it's a sniper with decent range, 275 to be in fact, as it's got crane gunners on top, but its main purpose more or less is to find stalking units, and, well, there's not that many. We don't really have that many stealth-based factions, barring, what, Clanessian, maybe a little bit of Tzeentch? It's cool for what it is, and it's very impressive, but I haven't seen too much use out of it, not like, say, for example, the Sky Junk, but we'll get to that soon. If anything, this is one of those things that you just might not recruit a lot. I haven't seen that many uses. Its big use is that it is a harmony amplifier, so you can get better buffs from the harmony aspect. So yeah, you could probably bring that, but there's a few heroes that also do that, and even some other stuff too, so maybe not so useful in-game. I'm not trying to be negative, I've just not really seen too much use for this unit specifically. The Sky Junk, on the other hand, is completely different. It's got the same amplifier, it's got artillery on it, and it can drop bombs. Yeah, both balloons are kind of slow, but if you're looking for something which is going to be able to do quite a lot of damage, especially from afar, the Sky Junk is probably the best way to go. Keep in mind though that it is flying and it can't land, and it can get picked out by, say for example, a Bloodthirster, so if you see anything flying directly to you, get it down as soon as possible, or else you're going to start losing your Sky Junks. Keep in mind that they are still artillery pieces, and they will get hit pretty hard. I've used these quite a bit, mainly because they've got decent range, they're able to hit quite hard, and, you know, sometimes you're dealing with some factions that just won't be able to touch you. Say, for example, Khorne, unless he's got Bloodthirsters, he's not really going to be able to hit your Sky Junks, which keeps your artillery safe. Grand Cannons are one of your first normal artillery pieces, and they're quite interesting. 450 range is quite a distance, and you're able to bombard your enemies from a decent amount of area. Now, the only thing that really gets me is they're kind of slow, even with oxen pulling them. I feel like they could be a little bit faster. These are beasts of burden, and yes, they're not supposed to be too strong, but the idea of this would be keeping them mobile, I imagine. And while we're at the topic of oxen, how do they not go deaf? This is just super weird. Like, an animal like that should just get spooked if they hear that, right? I know, I'm bringing in too much real-world logic into a Warhammer game, but still. All in all, I'd say the unit is fairly useful. I more or less prefer the other one that we'll talk about in just a second, because it just does a lot more scatter damage, but if you're wanting to take down walls and so on, this is definitely the way to go. Fire rain rockets, on the other hand, are just fantastic. A little less range, but much more area effect damage. If you're used to the Imperial Hellstorm rocket batteries, this is pretty much the same thing, just with oxen pulling it, and it's really destructive. The damage output versus hordes is just wonderful, especially if you're going to be dealing with, say for example, Khorne, where they've got loads of bloodletters running around, or even better, especially better, I'd say, Nurgle, as obviously the Nurgle units are really slow, so if you can just bombard them, you can get rid of a lot of them right before they get to you. I've got a whole meme stack army of these, and it's definitely worth it if you just plot them into, say for example, a Skaven settlement and just go full ham on them. It's rather satisfying to see. Lots and lots of fireworks, and it will slow down your machine if you've got, say for example, 40 of them firing at one point. The Wuxing War Compass itself is an interesting unit, as it's a magical chariot. It will also make use of your Winds of Magic, so if you've got multiple spellcasters, maybe this isn't too great. But it does have a harmony amplifier, and the more of them that you have in your army, the stronger their spells get. So you can even improve the output damage of the 2 bound spells that you have. I must admit, I don't use these too much, as I normally take a Dragon-Blooded Lord and sometimes an Alchemist or an Astromancer, so I normally have everything that I need already, plus this can also be a mount option too. As a unit, I'd say that it could have its uses, I just haven't found it too much at the moment. It's still good, don't get me wrong, but it's more of those I don't really need one in my army type of thing. But now we can move on to the generic hero choices, and you can see that the Astromancer, which is your Law of Heaven's hero choice, can also have one as a mount option too, so I don't see the point of the unit one. That being said, it's a Law of Heaven spellcaster, it's a popular lore, you've got some very powerful damage dealing spells there, and you can have 2 different mount options, either the War Compass itself or a horse. It really much depends, though like I said, the War Compass is probably the best option if you want the extra buffs. I imagine that a singular War Compass will also buff up the mount version too. Either way, you don't really have that many different laws of magic, so you're going to want to level up at least 1 or 2 of these around your armies too. But that's pretty much it, as obviously Zhao Ming and Miao Yin share the same mechanics. And they can be very similar, but they do have different playstyles. As I've said from my own experience, and obviously this might vary from player to player, I found Zhao Ming to be very hyper-aggressive, whereas Miao Yin is a bit more on the defensive side and more passive. But let me know what you guys think about the Legendary Lords, and which one you prefer. There's a few more videos coming out today, hopefully. If not, they'll be coming out tomorrow, because I'm kinda stretched really thin at the moment, but I shall see you all very soon. The Lord Magistrate is one of your generic Lord choices. He is a melee character, no Winds of Magic whatsoever, though you'd still want to recruit a few armies with him too, as he's able to buff up the capabilities of troops, he's got some different augments and so on. He's not useless. A lot of people did think that, yeah, you've got the 2 spellcaster Dragon-Blooded, then the Magistrate was not going to be useful, but I've noticed that the capabilities of the character is just there, it's fine. You can obviously have them mounted too on a lantern and a horse. It's not too bad. The lantern probably keeps him safe. The thing is, he's also kind of slow. I mean, he's a bit chubby too, no disrespect. But there's definitely some uses to these lords, it's not just going to be totally ignored. You also have access to spellcaster based lords known as the Dragon-Blooded, one with the lore of Yang and one with the lore of Ying. I'm going to have videos detailing how to use their lores coming up very soon. Both the lores are very different, one focuses more on damage output whilst the other one is more focused on defensive. It's because they're so different that I do have a minor gripe that we don't have any heroes with these lores, so we could have a lord with Yin and a hero with Yang, but I'm assuming that that will be FLC or DLC in the future. But let's not think about that in the moment. Having unique spellcaster lords, especially with very different lores that you can use for different situations, is quite interesting as for Cathay, as you can keep the defensive lores on, say, the Great Bastion, or if you want to be more aggressive, you can have them in the Mountains of Morn. It depends on your roleplay aspect and obviously how you want to go about the game. In fact, you could even use the defensive one to push out the enemy lines and the aggressive one for defense. I'd say that I've been using both lores fairly equally, more so than the other lord choice, the Magistrate, but mainly because spellcasting is of course quite powerful, and when it comes to the campaign itself, I want spellcasters in my army, but my agents are normally out there dealing with the portals opening up and so on, so it's just a matter of convenience more than anything. So now you've seen all the stats for the new units. Obviously we're not checking out the legendary lords as they've already had their own video spotlight. Soon enough there'll be a video detailing both of the magical lords and how to use them, but let me know what you guys think about the units regarding Grand Cathay's roster. Hopefully this video doesn't seem like too much information, but I've been talking about everything regarding the units from my own experience. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below and let's have a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very soon. Have a good day.